Evening, everyone. All right, please be seated. I don't know if some of you had to swim up here or take your boats, or here in Texas, we're getting quite a few storms passing our way, which is very much appreciated. We can use the rain. It's much better than having to worry about fires because everything is so dry. So we're thankful for whatever we get as far as weather is concerned. All right. Welcome everyone to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Teacher Certification class. For those of you who are joining us, welcome. And we are in the character unit. We're going to be picking up on in chapter 6, where we left off previously. Let's get situated here. All right. I can make a difference. And we're going to look back to page LP6D. LP6D. And let's look back at procedure 3 there. I can make a difference. Have students read the introduction found on page 125 of their handbooks and explain that leaders guide and direct others towards a particular direction. Now, in this particular chapter here, we're going to really be talking about leadership and hitting home really hard on leadership, because we want the students. Now, just think about this here. I just want to go back just a little bit here before I finish reading that procedure. In case we have some, I know we do constantly get new people that are joining us and who are finding out about the Peaceful Solution and who are seeing the results and the benefits of, their peers, their family members, their co-workers, and so forth, who are following along and putting the practices of the concepts that are taught in the Peaceful Solution in their lives. And they're starting to see a difference in their attitude and their behavior and their way of thinking and their performance or output in their work, because they're becoming more responsible, more reliable. They're practicing self-control. Maybe they're not more prone to lashing out because they're controlling their emotions and so forth. Well, it comes because this knowledge that is presented in the Peaceful Solution is given to a person, and then they accept it, and then they start to put it to practice in their life, valuing, imitating, and practicing, which we cover in chapter 3. But we're not going to cover all of this, but I just wanted to give you kind of a brief summary in case you are joining us for the first time here. In chapter 1, and of course we would encourage you to go back, the downloadable format of the Peaceful Solution is on the official Peaceful Solution Facebook page there. You can just click the link to download the character unit, which is unit number 1 here in the intermediate series. But the first thing we covered in the first chapter of the Peaceful Solution lays the foundation for what character is. Character More Than Meets the Eye is the title of that chapter. And in that chapter, we talked about what character is, what the difference between character and personality is, the positive and the negative sides of character, and how your character is shaped. Then we moved on to chapter 2 here, and then, this is building up to chapter 6 here. Then we moved on to chapter 2 and talking about the effects of character within the family, because as we laid the foundation for what character is in chapter 1, well, now let's start to break down some of those pieces, such as environment and influence and genetics and so forth, that start to help to shape your character. A lot of people don't necessarily look back at their family environment and see, well, this is why I'm this way, or why I have a tendency to be like this, because, whether you realize it or not, your environment plays a huge impact in influencing the type of character that you develop over the lifetime. And without the proper education or information implanted into your mind to help you to see the difference between the positive side and the negative side, you're just going to have to roll with what you're given, right? We basically, like the previous teacher talked about, leaders, the negative ones as well as the positive ones, they're basing their leadership skills on what has already been taught to them, or what they've learned, the knowledge that they have, okay? Because our brains are a storehouse of knowledge, and we're able to draw off of what's already there, which means, it had to be put there at some point, either by us picking up a book and learning, or hearing it from a teacher, or just seeing it in our environment. And all these things are ways in which we learn, which we're educated. Not always is education sitting down and somebody reading to you out of a book, it is that way, but a lot of it is hands-on real life experience. And so your family plays a huge part in that as well. Then we moved on to chapter 3 of the making of a VIP. Excuse me. And in there we talked a lot about, excuse me, we talked a lot about influences and how important influences are to recognize the difference between, keep in mind in the peaceful solution, you hear a lot about things falling into two different categories, typically positive and negative, or right and wrong. Or some people you might hear them saying, great and bad and so forth, moral or immoral. And in that chapter, we talked about influences as well as how they can affect your character being positive or negative. And of course, being able to recognize the difference between a positive and negative influence and the effect that it can have on your decision-making process, because influences have the potential to change the things we value, right? And anything that has the ability to change what we value has the ability to change, excuse me, wow, I'm coughing right now, has the ability to change our character, okay? And of course, our character will be demonstrated through the decisions and the actions that we bring forth. And then we move forward from there to chapter 4, talking about maintenance there. Now that I have it, how do I keep it? And we talked about setting our mind in advance and recognizing and dealing with the curveballs and pitfalls that come up in just everyday aspects of life. It'd be perfect if everything just was peachy clean and super, problem free, maintenance free, right? Nothing is maintenance free. There's always some level of maintenance you have to do, to anything, especially our character. We have to continually rehearse and practice these concepts that we're taught in the peaceful solution in order to maintain a positive character. Your mind is like a muscle, and there's lots of different compartments in that, in your mind, that information is stored. And when you get new information in, it seems like sometimes that the old information is pushed back. And if you've ever had a table with a lot of books on it, and you keep adding books to it, well, eventually the book at the furthest end is going to end up falling off, right? And sometimes our minds can be that way if we, there's nothing wrong with gathering new information, but when it comes to our character, we should never let go or forget the basic concepts or principles that we're learning in the peaceful solution. We should never forget those things. That way we're not caught off guard when we face with having to make a moral decision. Okay, so that's what we talked about. Now that I have it, how do I keep it? Not being caught unprepared, and also how our reputation goes before us. Why it's important that we demonstrate positive character traits on a consistent basis, because that becomes how people see us. Okay. Then we moved in chapter 5, which the one before this, which is the ripple effect, character, society, and the world, and just talked in there. That chapter focused on how choices of an individual or a group of individuals can ripple outward and affect an entire community, whether it's the choice of one child affecting a family or one child affecting a classroom, how one person can affect an entire community. It was mentioned about some of the riots that have been taking place throughout society, and we've seen a lot of things in the last few years. We actually had the opportunity to travel to Ferguson, Missouri, after that, not during, but after that, the rioting had taken place, and it was pretty sad to see the devastation in that small. It was a very small city, not a big metropolis at all, because of one or more people deciding to act out their emotions violently. And many people lost businesses. They weren't, they had stuck a lot of their time and their resources into building a business in order to serve the community, which that business is no longer there. Therefore, that service to that community was not there as well. So you can see the ripple effects in a negative way, but also how positive character ripples outward too. And we love to see a lot more of that in our society. It is there, but it seems like the bad outweighs the great. And that's, not really any fault of the individual making bad choices. It's just a lack of positive character education in our society right now. And we here realize that, and that's why we've endeavored to learn of course, these positive concepts, accept and practice them, but also what we're going to be covering and talking about in this chapter 6, becoming leaders, becoming positive leaders, to be able to teach these things to others. Because what benefit is it if you read every single book there is on mechanics, how to fix pretty much anything that's mechanical, from a car to a machine to a printer or whatever it is, but you never put it into practice. How have you benefited someone else by just keeping it locked away in that iron vault that is your mind, right? The more information that we are given, it's like one of the teachers mentioned, William mentioned in the last class, our minds are like a field, and either weeds or healthy seeds, plants and grass and so forth like that, is planted there that is beneficial. And our minds are going to grow whatever's planted there. So if we put negative influences, negative seeds there, then that's what our mind's going to grow. And eventually that's going to come forth in our actions. So in this chapter 5, we talked about the ripple effect of character, and of course, keeping all these other things in mind, and how positive character and negative character ripples out, and it affects the world and society as a whole. And so that brings us up to where we are in chapter 6, just to give you a quick, speedy rundown, in case someone is catching up with us for the first time. I would encourage you to please go back and reread those chapters. They're very vital to you understanding what we're going to be covering tonight and in the following classes. So we're talking about a leader, and we talked about what, how leaders are in our society, and they govern certain aspects of society, and they're very important. Leaders are very important within society. In fact, there's no aspect within a person's life, or no time, I guess I should say, within a person's life where they're not going to need a leader. We're always going to need a leader. And it seems like the more, as children, I think the scientific study said, of course, there's been several that have come out, but the average maturity, so to speak, so, not set in stone, of the development of a human mind is right around the age 20, 25, 24, 25, somewhere years old. Okay, 25, 26 years old, which means a person is still developing and grasping the concepts of making right and wrong choices, and not jumping out and making impulsive decisions that they'll later regret. Many people have done many things in their 20s that they can't go back and undo, and they regret a lot of those decisions. Now it's even moving further back to the late teens and the preteens. We've been to some junior high schools and elementary schools where some of these children have been involved in some very risk-taking behaviors that most of us probably wouldn't have even thought of, until our mid to late teens. Okay, but this is how down society has gotten, or how far society has gotten away from incorporating moral character development into, the school systems, into the workplace, into every aspect of society. This is why we need a whole new class, so to speak, as a class in learning, but a whole new class, and I would almost say an upper class, right? Because as what we're learning here represents true moral values. It represents strength. And I'm not talking about upper class based in wealth, but this could be considered a true source of wealth, this information that we're learning here in the Peaceful Solution. So yes, that does put those students who become teachers in an upper class. Not that you look down on someone with a snooty look, I know about positive character development. What do you know? No, it's you look at people with a whole new point of view. You see that people make decisions not because they're stupid, or because, they don't have great genes, or they came from the other side of the track. You look at them and you go, well, they haven't been educated. Is there anything that I can do to educate them, or to help them, or set them on a road in a positive direction, so that they can see the immoral things that they have done and start making better choices. That's what a leader does. Okay. And so, it's so important that we grasp all these things and take confidence in the information that is presented here in the Peaceful Solution. The more you learn it and the more you have it resting in the forefront of your mind, the more confident you're going to be able to give a fitting answer when somebody presents you with a question in regards to how to answer or respond using these positive moral values or these character traits that we're learning here. So let's look at procedure 3 there. Says have students read the introduction found on page 125 of their handbooks and explain that leaders guide and direct others in a particular direction. And have students read the section entitled Who is a Leader found on page 126 and complete the exercise that follows entitled Name the Leaders and discuss who some of the prominent leaders are in the community, nation, or foreign countries and what their roles are. For example, the president's job is to lead the nation, the governor's job is to lead the state, the mayor leads the city, and so on. What are some of the advantages of having leadership and the results of not having it in these areas? And of course, some of the answers will vary, but we know that when there isn't a positive leader, now just keep in mind, because we're going to talk about here, there's going to be leaders. And sometimes people naturally gravitate to certain people because of characteristics that they have, whether it is character traits or personality traits. But that does not necessarily mean that just because that person's in the position of a leader, that they're a positive leader. Well, we want to understand from the standpoint of somebody who's looking at a leader, what to look for, but also from the standpoint of someone who is aspiring to be a leader, how we should conduct ourselves, right? So from both ends, because like I said, there's never going to be a time in your life where you don't have a leader. Even somebody like take the co-founder and CEO of Amazon. Now some people might say that he's a great leader. Some people might say that. I don't know the man personally, right? He's got billions of dollars. Now, can he just take his car and drive on the interstate any way he wants to? No. There's a leader out there who's going to enforce the rules, or an authority out there who's going to enforce the rules to keep the road safe. And it doesn't matter what position that you might have in a company, in certain other environments, you're going to have somebody who has authority over you and is leading you. Okay. So, just keep that in mind. Don't ever think, and you want to, impress this in the mind of your students, because a lot of young people, especially when they start getting more responsibilities, or they might, get a position in the school, possibly they might become a class president, or they might become, the leader of the debate team or something like that. Sometimes it can be easy the natural tendency to kind of get the big head, so to speak, and, oh, I'm the leader, it's great to be king, and they might not take into consideration that, I think there's an old saying, well, I can't think of it right now, but a king with no subjects is just what? A man sitting on a chair, right? It takes a team. And within that team, you have leaders and you have followers, and you have different leaders in different positions, even underneath the top leaders. So it takes a big team. So let's look at page 125 here. Under chapter 6, I can make a difference, in the introduction there, and the very top bubble there says, the truth is the only person you can change is you. And that is a fact that resonates throughout this entire program. Right, especially when we get into book 2, unit 2, acceptance, we're going to reiterate that more and more and more and more. Right, and accepting certain things about yourself, about situations, about others, and keeping in mind though throughout all of that is that the only person we have the power and the ability to directly make a change in is ourselves. We can influence, we can encourage, we can motivate somebody else by being a positive example, but they have to internalize those concepts and go, you know what? Yeah, I see the point you're making. I want to make a change too. I want to make a difference in my life. And then they take the steps to do that. But we can only change ourselves. Don't let your mind think, well, I can only change myself, so what does it matter that I put forth the effort to be an example to somebody else? No, you never know how that example, or your encouraging word could be a powerful influence to somebody, that becoming a turning point in their life. So let's look at the paragraph here. It says, have you ever considered what the world would be like when you become an adult? Will technology have advanced so much that cars would fly and vacations could be taken on another planet? Will the effects of violence and crime still ripple outward, causing fear, hate, and mistrust? Or will the value of having a moral character stop the fighting and wars? Will our society be better or worse? And this, the main thing here is the effects of this violence or moral character. And remember, this is targeted to the 11 to 13-year-old. Okay, and so when they read this, put yourself in their shoes when you were 11, 12, or 13. What was the hope for the future? What did we desire to see? Most of us, I would say, at least speaking for myself, I didn't really think about, the violence in society. There was violence in society, of course, but it wasn't on the forefront of my mind. Why? Because it wasn't directly within my environment. Now, some people grew up in environments where that took place a lot, and they either became callous to it, or they became, I really hate this. I don't like being in a violent environment. I hope that, the future brings with it change. As well as, some of the technological advances that we might have hoped to see in the future. I was just talking to somebody a couple days ago, and I was saying, I remember in junior high, I remember the, it was in junior high. Two things I remember: the librarian, because that's where we went kind of for like media class, or and reading as well. But she was telling us that they're working on a new system where you can be able to go onto a computer and talk with people all over the world. And she says it's going to be called the World Wide Web. And I'm like, oh, that'll never take off. It was not like anything. I didn't care. I didn't have a computer or anything at home, And I remember her showing us also a big record-like thing that was called a laser disc. It was about as big as a record, big silver, shiny laser, just like something from like Space Odyssey or something like that. And we're like, whoa. She's like, this thing can store an entire volume of encyclopedias. And we're like, our minds were blown, because you think of a volume of encyclopedias that big, from A to Z, and then all your indexes and so forth, all on this little, record. And then they came out not too long after that with compact disc, right? And so, everything is continued to expand and grow technologically. And no, we're still not in flying cars, unless you consider jets as flying cars, or, hovering skateboards or anything like that. But, even if we were to the point where we were able to go to different planets to go do research or science projects, or, take a hiking trip or something, what would we as a society bring to that environment? That would be determined by our character, right? It would be determined by our character. If we left that place in worse shape than it was before the humans got there, or left it in just as great a shape or even better after we left. And that's one thing that I remember when I used to do a lot of camping in my youth, the commander used to always tell us, always leave the site. It was just nature. We didn't go to really a lot of campgrounds. We used to hike in the Alleghenies, and he said, always leave it better than what how you found it. Don't leave any trash. Don't leave any traces of you being here, right? Because it just becomes a problem for the environment. The bears and the animals, sometimes they swallow things that can cause them harm and so forth. So anyway, let's look at the next chapter here, paragraph. Whose responsibility is it to ensure a safe world for you to grow up in? Well, the truth of the matter is, your future is too important to hope that someone else will make a difference. It is up to each and every person to consistently demonstrate character skills that will result in peace between individuals, society, and the world. Excuse me. And if you think about that, it's up to us. It's up to each individual. But when you think about each individual, taking that to heart and putting that into practice in their life and teaching their families. And just imagine, a mother and the father teaching their children these concepts, and being responsible, and making positive choices, and not doing anything that brings harm to the environment. And think about them doing that for 20 years, and then that child finally grows up and have children of their own. Now think of a whole community, or a whole society, or a whole nation, upholding those values. What will that nation, or that society, or that community be like by the time the next generation comes? It's going to be in a pretty great condition, and the values that are taught and upheld are going to give the child that comes into that world kind of a head start to be able to make better choices, because not only is it going to be implanted in their genes, but they're going to see it in their environment through the things that are on television, the advertisements, and so forth. But they're going to be taught it consistently from the time that they're born or conceived to the time they become adults themselves. And so, society will just start to get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's what when we talk about strength in leadership, we always want to, consider the positive. It's the positive aspect of strength, right? Knowledge is power. Okay. There's a statement that says, the pen is mightier than the sword. And you think about that because, as far as I know, most swords are not designed or created to, cut hair, or plow a field or build a house. Swords are typically designed to kill and maim and destroy, and to incite fear in the minds of those who see them. But a pen, on the other hand, now, it could do this very thing that we're looking at right now. It can instruct, it can guide, and it can encourage, it can lift up, right? It can teach someone how to be a better person. Nobody's ever become a better person because they had their leg hacked off by a sword. Okay, and in that regard, a pen is mightier than the sword, and that's why we should always be looking towards peaceful solutions in our resolving of problems, because your tongue can also act as a sword as well. We covered that in chapter 2 of the effects of character within the family, and how those words can hit just as hard or harder than a fist. Coming from leaders, as parents are to their children, those can hurt very bad, and it can infect a child in such a way that they will always devalue themselves until they're taught something different. They won't see the value in their own life. So now it says, this is the only way to ensure that your future in society will be safe and secure for all people. Now in this chapter, you will explore how character, which is found on page 25 there, character helps you to determine what is right and wrong. You will explore how character, along with positive leadership skills, will enable you to make a difference in your life and the life of others. You can make a difference. Start today. And then at the bottom, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And like William said in class, if we didn't think we could do this, and if we didn't think this was important, we wouldn't be here. And sure, it could be easy to look at society as a whole, 8 billion or so people, and think, man, that's just too monumental of a task, right? Most of us in this room have seen a car at some point in time in our life, right? Yeah, somebody? Everybody? Okay. We've seen an airplane. No? Okay. You've seen a cell phone, or, a pen, or a light bulb, right? You think about if the person who had the thought to invent these things thought to themselves, oh, that's too monumental of a task to put billions of cars in the world. Man, I'll never get any sleep. No, but they took the first step. And it's no different with changing society. Yes, it is possible to change the course of human interactions. It is possible to change society and redirect mankind's thoughts in a positive way. Is it going to occur overnight? No. That's not being realistic. That's not setting realistic goals. You set a positive one, but you didn't set a realistic one. It's going to take time and it's going to take a lot of effort. Okay? And each and every single one of us have taken or are taking the steps in the right direction to bring about this change. You know, it's a saying, be the change you want to see. You know, and by us taking these things to heart and learning everything that we can and rehearsing it and putting it into practice every opportunity that we have, you know, we're demonstrating self-leadership. Okay, and that's very important, like we're going to talk about, because we have to be able to lead ourselves. We have to believe in the things that we're telling others to do in order to be a convincing leader to somebody else, right? I mean, if you think about if you were going to go to let's just say you're going to hire a personal trainer, right? And you went there and this guy came out and he's all, you know, greasy and sweaty, you know, he's 200 pounds overweight. He's got a turkey bone in his hand, you know, and he's going to tell you, oh, I'll get you in shape in no time, burping and stuff like that. Would you be convinced to follow that guy in your personal, you know, training goals? I don't think that'd be very convincing, you know, and this is why it's important to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk, not just as a facade, but to really do it. You know, people have confidence in people who know what they're talking about, right? You know, I don't want to hear a pilot on a plane come over the intercom while I'm 35,000 feet in the air and going through a storm and crazy turbulence. This is your captain speaking. Don't worry, I've seen this video before on YouTube. All right, I think I can get us through this. You know, that does not incite confidence in any of those passengers on the plane. You know, you want to know that you're the leader of that plane is able to make the decisions that will get us down to the ground safely. And it's no different in any other aspect in life, whether it's parenting, teachers, whether it's running a business or just being a supervisor over a crew or just being amongst your friends, right? You don't have to be in a structured environment, just a group of friends. You know, someone, anybody at any time can be a leader, a positive leader in that group of friends. So let's look at page 126 here. And, you know, as we turn to that page there, always, you know, a lot of times we do it after the fact. You know, we have an interaction with somebody, possibly it was a conflict and you know, maybe it got resolved, maybe it didn't at that time. But a lot of times we go back over and we rehearse that in our minds. You know, wow, what, you know, could I have said this a little bit differently? You know, how was my body language when I did this? You know, it's kind of like critiquing ourselves, you know. Well, you know, a leader kind of has a little bit of foresight, right? Kind of like we covered in setting your mind in advance. You know, they kind of think in advance on how they're going to conduct themselves when a situation comes up. Now, you can't predict everything. You can't predict every situation that'll come up in your life, but you can set your mind in advance to know how to deal with something as it arises. Because for the most part, it might be a certain set of circumstances that might seem new, but it's always going to require the same outcome, right? Bringing about a peaceful solution. You know, being honest and respectful. You know, is it mine? Don't take it. Don't steal. You know, whatever the case might be. So, but you're going to find the answer to those situations in what we're covering in these classes. But you know, try to think about scenarios in your mind. Right, and a lot of people who train to deal with emergency situations, they do a lot of role playing scenarios, because if you have your mind trained to respond in a certain way, you won't be caught off guard and react impulsively. Right, it's kind of like what I said. You know, having a trained and governed response is important. You know, because it'll keep you from making decisions that can bring harm to yourself or others or to make the situation even worse. This is why emergency personnel who come to a scene are called first responders and not first reactors, right? They're responding based on their training to bring about a solution to that situation that they're in. So let's look at page 126 there. It says, who is a leader? Who is a leader? Take me to your leader, Earthling. Apparently even little green men from Mars know the value of leaders within a society. In ancient and modern times, the need for leadership has always been important. Now, if you would, I underline these next three words here. Without strong leaders, or the two words after that, with strong leaders, strong leaders. Now, like I said before, when you think of strength, don't think of, negativity. I think of negativity as weakness, right? It's weakness because either a person doesn't know or they know and they're choosing to do the wrong thing. Either way, that's a form of weakness. A person just letting themselves go and verbally abusing someone, or even worse, physically abusing someone because they just couldn't control themselves. No, a strong leader is always in control of his thoughts, his words, and his actions. His or her thoughts, words, and actions. And when you think of that word strong there, so what I did is I put a little line there. Strong or strength equals power. And what did we learn already? Knowledge is power. All right. And LP6A, I just want to go back there and read something because William covered something great there in his class. LP6A, at the bottom of the first paragraph, above the concepts that are be taught, it says, teaching leadership to our children is about empowerment. And he covered a little bit about empowerment there and how important it is. And it says there in the next sentence, we must empower them to speak up and stand up for, notice here, what is morally correct. Not just standing up for what they believe in. Some people might believe in retaliation. Some people might believe in gun violence. No, standing up for what is morally correct. That's the key word in that sentence there. Teaching our children to stand up for what is morally correct. Well, of course, how are they going to stand up for morally correct? For what's morally correct, unless we as leaders in this situation, parents and teachers, teach and guide them in the concepts of what is morally correct. We can't expect children, or really anybody for that, because every adult was once a child, to automatically know what the morally correct decision is. Now, it might be said, well, it's common sense, they should know better. Well, to know, they should know. Well, they would know if they were taught. But most people have not been taught. Empower there. That word empower means to give power or authority to. And the word power means the ability to do or act, the capability of doing or accomplishing something. And in this case, it's doing or practicing these positive character traits, these concepts that are taught, and accomplishing something. One of the things that you can think about is what's on the front of the book, changing the hearts and the minds, in order to be positive, moral, responsible leaders in society, right? And able to lead and guide themselves, and also lead and guide others in a positive direction. All right, so without strong leaders, a society lacks guidance and direction. All through history, certain people were designated and to guide and direct others in a particular direction. These people were called leaders. They have authority over, and remember, an authority is one who is in charge of and responsible for others. Okay, and in many cases that can vary from place to place. If I let's say I'm the authority over my family in my house, right? Or on the job site, I'm the authority. Well, when I go into, the hardware store to get something, I'm no longer the authority there. Whoever's the manager over that store is the authority. I can't just walk in there and pick up a hammer and walk out. That'd be stealing. Why? Because the authority says it's stealing. It's theirs. It belongs to them. Now, if it was in my house and I paid for it, yeah, I can go and pick up the hammer and use it. Why? Because it's my house. It's mine. I paid for it. I'm the authority over it. Okay. And so authority changes from environment to environment. And a leader, a positive leader, recognizes that. They don't just walk into a place puffed up and say, I run a 15-man crew. I run a 100-man crew or whatever. I've got a Fortune 500 business. And, you know, that doesn't mean anything in this environment, okay? Because there's a different set of authorities in that environment. Remember, we'll never be without leaders. We'll never have a lack in our life for someone who is an authority over us to guide and direct us, just like we in that position of a leader guide and direct others. So it says they have authority over and responsible for those who follow them. Leaders are not defined, notice here, by age, gender, or nationality. Leaders are simply, and I underline this, it's already bolded for you, so you might not have to, but it's a great point to remember. Leaders are simply people who possess qualities and skills, and we're going to cover some of those qualities and skills here, that motivate and encourage others towards specific goals. Motivate and encourage others. The words motivate and encourage, because those are the two kind of binding words there in that statement, that sentence. The word motivate comes from the word motive, and you've probably heard it used before, in police lingo, or, when they're investigating a crime or something, he had the motive. He had the motive. He was jealous. He thought his wife was cheating on him, or he thought something like this was taking place. The motive for doing something. Well, the word motive means a reason for doing something. It also means of power or force or causing movement or action, right? Like the internal combustion of an engine causes movement. It causes action. That air and fuel and spark, creates a mechanical action as those pistons get pushed down, and then that's converted into horsepower and torque, and then the drive line, and then to the rear end, and then the wheels, and the car or truck is able to move forward. Okay, in electricity they have something called EMF, or electromotive force, and that's that movement of those electrons through that conduit or conductor in order to have an effect on something like a motor, or or a load in the case of electrical lingo. All right, and then the word there, encourage. It means to help someone to feel confident and able to do something. To help someone feel confident and able to do something, or to give advice to someone to do something. Then the example they give: if something encourages an activity, it supports it or makes it more likely. And when you think of the word encouragement, and some of the synonyms for that was to buoy. I think a buoy, like a buoy, like B-O-U-Y or B-U-O-Y. I can't remember how it's spelled. To buoy up or to cheer up, or you think about encouragement, it's kind of a lifting up, right? And when I was looking at that, a thought flashed in my mind, that leaders are simply people who possess qualities and skills that motivate and encourage others towards specific goals. So we know motivation causes movement. All right, we want to motivate people to make right choices. We want to motivate people to think about, the thoughts that run through their mind. Think about and consider the influences that they're faced with on a daily basis, and eliminate the negative and accentuate the positive. And then, what comes out from them, their actions, their decisions, let them be positive. Okay, so moving forward, and then we think of encouragement, we think of lifting up. Well, the two things I thought about was an airplane. I've always liked, it always amazed me how this big hunk of metal can get off the ground and just soar effortlessly through the sky. And the few times that I've had the opportunity to ride on the airplane, I kind of get a sense of reality. I try to think about it too much, but I'm like, man, it's like only like 6 or 10 feet between me and 35,000 feet down to the ground. It can be kind of a scary thought, but the way that is engineered, it's simply the application of two things: thrust and lift. You can't get a plane in the ground. You can get in the ground, but you can't get the plane off the ground safely without those two things consistently taking place. And it's the same thing with leaders encouraging and motivating their those who follow them. You want to push them in the right direction, but also lift them up. right? You want to lift them up by giving them these concepts, teaching them in these skills, helping them to develop these character traits that, and when I say lift up, I mean helping them to become better people, helping them to be able to support and give back to society in a way that adds to and does not take away from. Okay. And so that just made me think about that, and motivating and encouraging. It's just really something for me to remember. When I think of a plane, you've got to have thrust and lift. You got to have both, a way for the air to lift the plane up, and you have to have the jets, the thrust, the propeller, whatever it is, to push it forward so that that lift can be created. And you've got to have the two things in order for a leader to be successful in leading his followers, his or her followers, towards specific goals, and whatever that goal might be. Then the next paragraph there says, leaders can be found in all areas of our society. There are religious leaders, governmental leaders, community leaders, political leaders, and even gang leaders. And so we see here a combination of both positive and negative here. Can be either positive and negative. And in any one of these things, these leadership fields that we covered, they can be positive or negative. You can have a positive gang. You can have a negative gang. You can have a positive governmental leader or a negative governmental leader. Okay. Some leaders are responsible for an entire country. Like we talked about at the very beginning, it could be the president, it could be the prime minister, it could be the king. In some places where monarchies exist, the king is the one who is tops in command, and they make the final decisions on things that govern their nation or their country. While others are responsible for a small city, which could be, a mayor. Some leaders have a lifetime position in the office they were chosen to govern. And in this case, that kind of makes me think of the monarchy. The king is usually king until he dies. He's not voted out of office. That's something that he inherits, or until he chooses to pass it on to someone else. While others are there for a specific time, and that could just be because of a term limitations, or, in the United States, we have what's called democracy. And so, presidents are elected for terms. Well, everybody is: presidents, governors, senators, and congressmen and women, and so forth. So at the bottom here, this is an activity that, you can go over with your students, and it would be great to do this, maybe do like a before and after with them, and, come back the next week, ask them now, kind of like a pop quiz, name the leaders in your nation, town or state. Do you know any other political leaders? What are the religious leaders in your community, and who are some leaders in foreign countries? Just to kind of pick your mind. It's great to have kind of a broader view, of what's taking place in society, who's in society. A lot of times, a lot of young people don't really watch news. I when I was young, only time I ever remember really watching the news was to see if it was going to snow, so I didn't have to go to school that day. That was one time. And the other time was when there was some type of, when I was really young, and I think I was in elementary school, the Challenger disaster took place when I was in school. And I remember actually being home from school that day. I was sick or had a doctor's appointment or something like that. And I still remember watching the television on the top of the refrigerator. I don't know why it was on the top of the refrigerator, but that's where it was. And seeing that the history of that, that explode. But didn't mean to get off on that. But a lot of young people aren't familiar with the leaders in society, not even within their own community in a lot of cases. So, this would be a great opportunity just to kind of get them to, look a little bit, to investigate a little bit and see, well, who are the leaders in our community? Who is our mayor? Or do we, who's the senator? Who's the representative over our area here? And of course, you've got mayors, and sometimes you have council people even. Council people who govern certain districts and so forth, or the local county sheriff, so it wouldn't be a bad thing to get them familiar with leaders within the community. Pop quiz it, ask them, then come back a week later, see if they're familiar with it. Okay. All right. So let's look here. Let me just make sure. Yeah. Let's look to no, procedure 4 on LP 6D. Procedure 4. Tell students that both positive and negative leaders are present within our society. Explain that it is important to look beyond personality traits. Okay, we're going to cover that. We covered that at the very beginning as far as personality and the difference between character and personality. And personality is important, but the character is what plays the vital role in determining if that person is a positive or a negative leader. Now, the personality goes with the character. You can't discount that at all. But we have to be able to kind of like old Johnny Carson in a hermetically sealed envelope, know what's on the inside by knowing the person's character. And of course, you can't just look at a person and say, "Oh, I can tell you've got a bad character or a great character." No, it comes over a period of time, and we're going to learn that in the next chapter. But ultimately, we can determine that by the choices that they make. Right? We can see over a period of time the type of choices that they make, how they handle situations. In dealing with other people, or how they handle themselves in dealing with things, right? Sometimes people think nobody's looking, and they'll go crazy over something like that. It was funny because I was doing a job, and I was working on the floor in the house, and the guy was off in his own room because he couldn't really walk on the floor. And I was kind of finished up for the day, and I was going to get ready to walk and knock on the door because I knew he was in there. And all of a sudden, I heard all this cursing and beep, beep, beep. There was no censor, but I'm just beeping it out for you. And I heard all this yelling and everything. And I went to knock on the door, and I was like, oh, okay, I don't know if I want to go in there. It sounds like it's dangerous, Turns out he was playing some type of first-person shooter game. And he had his headphones on. He couldn't hear me knocking on the door, and I didn't realize that till he opened the door and he was showing me some things in there. And I'm like, wow, I'm thinking, those influencers that he's putting in his mind, I wonder how he acts when he gets stuck in, traffic or something like that. But it's important that we consider how we respond to things even when we're by ourselves, okay? Because that also comes from our character. So explain that it's important to look beyond personality traits in order to decide if a leader demonstrates, here you go here, this is the key word there, demonstrates, which is showing or acting out or presenting through their actions, their conduct, their words, positive or negative leadership qualities. Have students read the section found on page 127 entitled The Deciding Factor and complete the exercise Identifying Leadership Styles found on page 128, and emphasize, make it really stand out in the student's mind that positive leadership is advantageous to all. It's very beneficial to all, right? Negative leadership seems to only benefit, if you want to use that word for lack of a better word, only the person who is taking advantage of the other person. But really, it's not, because they're hurting themselves as well. They're bringing harm to themselves by treating somebody else disrespectfully or taking something that doesn't belong to them. There is no benefit that comes from that. But positive leadership, that's advantageous. That's beneficial to everybody involved. Remember what we covered in the previous chapter, that ripple effect. Think about a positive leader who upholds and teaches his team the principles that are found in what we're covering here and what we're going to be covering in future classes. And that team grasps hold of those concepts, and they practice what's in chapter 3. They value, imitate, and they practice. They look to that leader as a role model, and they start emulating those principles as well. And that whole team demonstrates positive leadership abilities. They demonstrate positive character traits. Can you imagine the amount of work that team's going to accomplish? Can you imagine how that team will be held up by their peers and looked up to by their peers as a standard because of their ability to cooperate, to solve problems, to demonstrate self-control and be reliable and responsible, to complete tasks until they're completed, and actually work to serve one another. Yes, when you have a team, the leader serves the team and the team serves the leader, and everybody works together to help one another out to accomplish the goal. Okay. It's kind of like, our bodies. if a part of our body fails to do its job, it seems like the whole body suffers as a result of it. Right. Or, like if one part of our body, I know probably a lot of us have stubbed our toe at night on the way to the refrigerator to get a drink of cold water or something like that, and it ain't just your toe that suffers that pain. The entire body feels for that toe, right? Or smashed your finger with a hammer or close it in the door or whatever the case might be, or even bit your lip, or heavens forbid you have a toothache. Man, if anything can put a grown man down, it's a toothache, But it's the same way, a team, a leader, whether it's of a community, whether it's a family, whether it's in work, or just a group of friends, it's at that point in time, it's like a little body. And in order for it to function properly, there has to be mutual respect given to everybody. And there has to be a recognition of the leader and their role and, the followers following the instructions of that leader, and doing everything that they can to see to it that that job is accomplished. Sometimes you have to stay over, a little bit. Sometimes we have to put in a little extra effort. One of the things that I remember, and I'll leave you here as we're getting ready to close up here. One of the things that I remember, I don't know why. Maybe it was something that my parent was instilling in me. Whatever you do your very best. And whenever I worked for someone, didn't matter what job it was, I always determined to do the very best that I could. I always determined to do that job as if it was my company. I would ask the owner or the supervisor, sometimes they were both the same person, what is this? How do you want me to do it? What do I need to get it done? And sometimes I would stay longer to get it done. I would make that sacrifice, to see to it that team benefits, at least from the portion that I had control over. Now, I didn't have control over this guy over here or that guy over there, but I had control over what I was doing. And my goal was to always do the very best that I could, in service to that leader. Because when I was working there, I was serving that person. I was serving everybody else. If he owned a company and he was in customer service, well, the work that I did served that entire, base of customers. Okay. And so it's important that we think about, when we go through this chapter here, when we look at leadership, we're not just only looking at it from the point of view of only us becoming leaders, because we are training to become leaders. Teachers are leaders of others, but recognizing positive and negative aspects of leaders within our society. So we're not duped into following influences just because a person is a leader, not following or yielding to negative influences or compromising on our positive character values just because that person is in a leadership position and has told us to do that. Never compromise on morality. There is no compromising in doing the right thing. Well, he's my friend, or he's the boss, or he can get me a raise. No, never weaken yourself or lower yourself, in that situation. Always maintain and hold on to your positive moral values and maintain or continue to be a person of integrity. And I guarantee you will see the benefit in the long run, even if you have to have a little bit of a setback or step back, in order to get that, that you didn't need that person anyway. You can take that experience and learn how to be a better leader, if you do get the opportunity in the future, so that you can be a benefit to others. So we're going to stop right there on page 126. We'll pick up on 127. And 5-2, May 2nd, Sunday, May 2nd, will be our next class at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. I thank everyone for joining us, and have a great evening and a safe week.